Right now, you're sitting in front of a screen. I need to ask you something. Nuclear facilities hidden behind the world's deepest, thickest concrete walls, carved into the heart of mountains. Can they be destroyed by bombs? For years, people said it was impossible. But on the morning of June 22, 2025, 7 aircraft that took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri answered that question before the eyes of the world. And that answer was the kind that gets written into history books. Here's why this video will keep you hooked until the very end. You thought this attack was over. No. This was only the beginning. Let's set the scene first. June 2025. For years, Iran had been developing its nuclear program in plain sight, burying it underground, hiding it behind concrete walls, and step by step pushing out international inspectors. Iran's Fordow uranium enrichment facility had been built 80 to 90 meters underground, deep inside a mountain. That depth made destroying it with conventional bombs nearly impossible. The rest of the world knew this, but could do nothing about it. Not unless the U.S. had a special weapon. That weapon's name is the GBU-57A-B Massive Ordnance Penetrator. It weighs 30,000 pounds, roughly 13,600 kilograms. This bomb, belonging solely to the United States, could only be carried by B-2 Spirit bombers. And this bomb had never been used in a real operation until that day. It wasn't a prototype. It wasn't theoretical. But it had never been used. Until June 2025. According to Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Dan Kane, 2 officers from the Defense Threat Reduction Agency had studied the Fordow nuclear facility for approximately 15 years. These officers thought about the facility even in their sleep. Ventilation shafts, exhaust systems, electrical connections, every entry and exit point. For 15 years. And then that moment finally came. June 13, 2025. Israel launched a comprehensive air campaign against Iran in an operation it called Operation Rising Lion. Israel significantly weakened Iran's air defense systems and ballistic missile production capacity, targeting numerous senior Iranian military officials and nuclear scientists. But Israel had one shortcoming. It did not possess the munitions needed to destroy facilities buried inside mountains like Fordow. The only country capable of doing that was the United States. And America waited. 8 days. For a full 8 days, the world watched with its eyes fixed. The Trump administration ran its calculations, completed its assessments. On the morning of June 22, 2025, at 2:10 a.m. local time, Operation Midnight Hammer began. 7 B-2 Spirit bombers took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. They refueled 3 times during the flight. This 18-hour mission was the longest B-2 Spirit mission conducted since 2001. Each aircraft carried 2 of those lethal bombs. 14 munitions in total. Within 25 minutes, 14 massive ordnance penetrators were delivered to 2 separate target areas. Fordow and Natanz. That night, Iran's nuclear program trembled inside the mountain. So what was the effect of these strikes? Did they actually work? General Kane disclosed that 12 massive ordnance penetrators were dropped in sequence into 2 ventilation shafts at Fordow, allowing the munitions to advance one after another deep into the mountain. This technique had never been used in any prior operation. But the calculations were based on decades of computer simulations. Satellite imagery revealed the extent of damage across 3 locations: Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Operations came to a complete halt. The CIA Director John Ratcliffe disclosed that some intelligence information indicated that several of Iran's key nuclear facilities had been destroyed and would need to be rebuilt over a period of years. An Iranian official also admitted that our nuclear facilities sustained serious damage. But this is where the picture starts getting complicated. Because not everything was as straightforward as expected. According to a leaked preliminary assessment from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Iran had moved a large portion of its uranium stockpiles to other locations before the U.S. strikes. The strikes were said to have set back Iran's nuclear weapons production capacity by only a matter of months. A few months. Not years. A few months. This leak shook Washington. The Trump administration characterized the assessment as a politically motivated leak. But the information had already ignited the debate. So what was the truth? The Pentagon's own assessment was that the program had been set back 1 to 2 years, more likely 2 years. This enormous gap between 2 years and a few months created deep fractures in closed-door deliberations. And one more question. Iran had approximately 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. Where was that material? Iran's approximately 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium was unaccounted for. It was most likely trapped inside the Fordow and Isfahan tunnel complexes, whose entrances had been sealed or buried under rubble. Trapped. Not destroyed. Not secured. The scene shifts to February 28, 2026. And everything begins again. On February 28, 2026, Israel and the United States launched a new series of strikes against Iran. The targets included Iranian leadership, the nuclear and ballistic missile program, and the armed forces. Over 12 hours, U.S. and Israeli forces carried out approximately 900 strikes. The first wave resulted in the deaths of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and dozens of senior officials. Khamenei, the man who had ruled the Islamic Republic of Iran for over 35 years, was no longer alive. This was an earthquake in the world's geopolitical balance. But that same night, a missile striking near a naval base close to Minab hit a girls' school. Approximately 170 civilians lost their lives. This tragedy inflamed international debate over the legitimacy of the strikes. The war was no longer just a military matter. To understand the scale of the operations, let's look at a few numbers. Commander of U.S. Central Forces Admiral Brad Cooper announced that the American military had struck more than 8,000 military targets in Iran since the beginning of the war. Among these were 130 Iranian naval vessels. This went down in history as the largest destruction of naval power within a 3-week period since World War II. 8,000 targets. 3 weeks. By the 10th day of the war, Iran's missile and drone attacks against Israel had dropped by over 90%. This was an even steeper decline than during the 2025 conflict. It was interpreted as a testament to the success of the combined U.S. Israeli pressure campaign. Iran's military capacity was collapsing, step by step. But the nuclear picture remained murky. March 2, 2026. A new strike on Natanz. The IAEA confirmed damage to the above-ground entrance buildings of the Natanz fuel enrichment plant. A statement was issued saying, no radiological consequence is expected and no additional impact on the facility has been detected, while also noting that the facility had already sustained serious damage in the June 2025 conflict. March 21, 2026. Natanz again. On March 21, 2026, the United States again targeted Natanz using bunkerbuster bombs. The same facility, again and again. Was this a message? Israel and the United States, despite inflicting serious damage on Iran's nuclear program during the June 2025 war, continued to demonstrate their resolve to completely eliminate reconstituted threats and remaining activities. Now we come to the fundamental question. Did these operations truly finish Iran's nuclear program? The short answer, no. The long answer is far more complex, and far more unsettling. 3 key findings stood out from the analysis. First, the strikes caused serious damage to Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan and brought operations to a halt. Second, the operations did not completely eliminate Iran's nuclear program. Activity at the Kui-Kolong site was continuing. Third, some critical unknowns remained unanswered. Kui Kolong. This name, which translates to Pickaxe Mountain, was one that analysts couldn't take their eyes off. According to satellite imagery, following the U.S. strikes, Iran began accelerating underground construction at the Kui Kolong site, carved into the Zagros Mountains approximately 1 mile south of the Natanz facility. Work at this site had been underway since 2020, but international inspectors had never been allowed inside. Think about it. Immediately after the strikes, construction is accelerating inside a secret tunnel inside a mountain. This is not surrender. This is reconstruction. When asked why Iran was building this facility, known as Pickaxe, near Natanz, the answer given was that it would serve as a centrifuge assembly facility. However, the IAEA was never granted permission to enter. The facility was estimated to potentially be located at a depth even greater than Fordow. Greater than 80 to 90 meters. A depth that even the world's most powerful bunker-busting bomb would struggle to target. Now let's look behind this picture. Because this story is not just about Iran and the United States. Analysts noted signs that Iran could rebuild its nuclear program. But whether this reconstruction could reach the same scale as before depended on receiving outside assistance, from Russia, China, North Korea, or some other partner. Russia, China, North Korea. When these three names enter the equation, the calculus changes fundamentally. Russia condemned the latest strike on Natanz, calling it a blatant violation of international law. Is Russia's statement symbolic, or is it a harbinger of deeper cooperation? Let's recall, Russia operates Iran's Bushehr nuclear reactor. Although the state-owned Rosatom evacuated some of its personnel from the region, its head Alexei Likachev stated that as of March 3, the reactor continued to operate at full capacity. In a war environment, nuclear cooperation between the two countries continues uninterrupted. This is no ordinary business relationship. Let's return to Iran's 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. This material is of critical importance. Why? IAEA Director Rafael Grossi disclosed on March 9 that he assessed just over 200 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium to be located underground in Isfahan. Approximately 200 kilograms of material at 60% enrichment, if raised to the 90% weapons-grade level, would be sufficient to produce approximately 5 nuclear warheads. 5 nuclear warheads. Right now. Beneath Isfahan. Amid the vibrations caused by bombs striking walls. Inside a tunnel no one can enter. According to a New York Times report published on March 7, U.S. intelligence circles assess that Iran can access this material through a small opening. The same sources stated that the U.S. and Israel were closely monitoring the area and expressed high confidence that they would detect any attempt to move the material. They are watching. Waiting and watching. Now it's time to step back and look at the big picture. These strikes are of a nature that changes the course of history. But how? The strikes carried out by Israel and the United States can be interpreted as proof that military counter-proliferation operations, beyond diplomatic or political efforts, can succeed in preventing the spread of nuclear weapons. These operations were also a reflection of the NPT's failure to restrain Iran's nuclear ambitions over decades. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The NPT. The framework the international community relied on for years had failed when it came to Iran. And in the end, the price was paid with bombs. But this sets a precedent. And precedent shapes the course of history. North Korea's nuclear facilities are inside similar tunnels. Can they be resolved by bombs today? Will another country face this question tomorrow? We also need to look at the diplomatic backdrop of the operations. The strikes came after indirect negotiations in February, aimed at a new agreement to constrain Iran's nuclear program, collapsed. The Omani foreign minister had announced that significant progress had been made and indicated Iran was ready to make concessions, but Trump had expressed that he was not happy with the negotiations. Iran was ready to sit at the table. But the US chose to leave the table behind. What lies behind this decision? Whether the administration genuinely exhausted diplomacy, or whether the use of force was a deliberate tool of pressure designed to change Iran's calculations at the negotiating table, this is the fundamental question that will determine what happens next. Did diplomacy run out, or did the bomb become the table itself? Let's look at Trump's position. In this picture, what does Trump want? Trump explicitly demanded the overthrow of the Iranian government. But at the same time, he also said he was open to a new supreme leader being appointed following Khamenei's death. This seemingly contradictory stance actually reflects a clear strategy. Shatter Iran, but also control what comes in its place. Yet Iran's population of 85 million is historically prone to nationalist reflexes and is heir to a deep-rooted tradition of statehood. A change imposed from outside carries the risk of descending into chaos rather than a controlled transition. And chaos is the most fertile ground for nuclear materials to disappear. Let's pause for a moment. Have you thought about how these strikes are affecting the balance of power in a completely different part of the world? Russia, Ukraine, and the war there. Iran supplied Russia with thousands of Shahid-brand drones. These drones repeatedly struck Ukraine cities, energy infrastructure, and civilian areas. The towns on Ukraine's eastern front lived in the shadow of weapons rolling off Iranian production lines. And now Iran's military capacity is rapidly eroding. Admiral Cooper noted that Iranian attacks had been steadily decreasing and said that Iran's combat capacity is in a steady decline as our offensive operations have increased. Cooper stated that thousands of Iranian missiles, advanced attack drones, and the entire Iranian navy used to disrupt international maritime shipping had been rendered ineffective. The entire Iranian navy destroyed. This directly impacts the supply chains Russia had been sourcing from Iran. And this ripples all the way to Ukraine on the other side of the world. Not on the battlefield, not directly. But a chain reaction that reaches there nonetheless. Now it's time to ask the dangerous questions. Are these strikes actually pushing Iran closer to a nuclear weapon? Military force can set back Iran's nuclear program and damage critical infrastructure. But Iran will continue to possess, at the end of this conflict, the technical knowledge required to build a nuclear bomb, and likely the critical materials as well. That sentence summarizes everything. A bomb cannot destroy knowledge. And knowledge is the most dangerous weapon. The nuclear engineering capacity Iran has accumulated since 1979 exists inside the minds of its physicists. Even if you kill them, this knowledge is woven into the social fabric of that country. What makes this assessment even more alarming is this: given all the unknowns and uncertainties, it is highly unlikely that the US and Israel have been able to track all of Iran's centrifuges. Iran, moreover, possesses the knowledge to produce more. We cannot track the centrifuges. And Iran can build more. This stands as a permanent zone of uncertainty in the post-operation world. So is there a winner in this war? In the short term, militarily, the US and Israel stand ahead. Iran's air defense has collapsed, its navy has been largely destroyed, its nuclear infrastructure has suffered heavy damage, its supreme leader has been killed. But in the long term? The truth is that we have crossed into a dimension where military strikes are increasingly insufficient in the nuclear domain. The issue of accountability for the material at Isfahan and Fordow requires a diplomatic or inspection-based solution. Bombs cannot produce verified inventories. Bombs cannot produce verified inventories. Read that sentence one more time. Because it summarizes the entire dilemma of these operations in a single sentence. The tunnel can be collapsed. But what's inside cannot be known. Was the material moved? Is it intact? Where is it? As long as the IAEA cannot get inside, these questions will remain unanswered. At this point, let's look at the broader geopolitical picture of the Middle East. In 2024, Israel significantly weakened Iran's extensions in the Middle East. Having largely neutralized Hezbollah in Lebanon in the September-November 2024 period in particular, Israel helped lay the groundwork that facilitated the fall of Iran-backed Syrian President Assad. Hezbollah, Syria, and now Iran's navy, missile power, and nuclear infrastructure. The network Iran calls its axis of resistance is being systematically dismantled. This picture is fundamentally changing Israel's strategic position. Israel, which for years lived under the shadow of Iran's proxies, is now approaching the position of the de facto dominant power in the region. But this comes at a cost. And this cost is not just for Israel or the United States, it is for the entire region. Let's look at the world's reactions. Britain, a key NATO member. Prime Minister Keir Starmer joined the leaders of Germany and France in condemning Iran's counterstrikes and called for a resumption of diplomacy. But Britain did not participate in the military operations. The Western alliance is officially moving together. But on the ground, this is solely a U.S. and Israeli operation. What is China doing? What is Russia saying? Beijing, as always, settled for the cliché of, "we call for de-escalation." But behind the scenes, China-Iran economic relations have been continuing for years. And China could become a strategic partner in Iran's reconstruction. Russia, meanwhile, finds itself in a contradictory position right here. On one hand it operates Iran's Bushehr reactor, on the other it is locked in conflict with the West on the Ukrainian front. These two fronts are not independent of each other. Now let's look to the future. What might happen in the coming months? Pickaxe Mountain is buried right next to the Natanz complex, up to 100 meters deep. Western intelligence circles assess that a new enrichment facility could be built in this area. Neutralizing this facility would require either massive ordnance penetrators dropped from the U.S.'s large munitions-carrying B-2 bombers, or commando teams capable of destroying the facility from within. From within. Commandos. This opens the door to a completely different dimension of the war. Covert operations. Intelligence. Sabotage. Israel has historically been extremely effective in this domain. From the Stuxnet virus to assassinations of nuclear scientists, Israel's backup tactic has been deployed time and again. And now again? And what about the risk of nuclear accident? IAEA Director Grossi repeatedly sounded alarms throughout the war. Director Grossi issued a powerful call for the parties to the conflict to urgently engage in a diplomatic path, one that would also allow the IAEA to restart its important verification activities in Iran. 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. Inspectors cannot get in. And the war continues. This represents an uncontrollable danger. A nuclear accident scenario would affect not just Iran but neighboring countries and beyond. And that scenario is still on the table. Standing at this point in history, we must ask, do these strikes mean the opening of another door? The North Korea question. Pyongyang has been closely watching this process in Iran. Should it move its own nuclear program even deeper underground, inside even larger mountains? Or should it open up to negotiations? The answer is not yet clear. But the message sent by these operations is this: hiding underground is no longer a complete guarantee. This represents a fundamental rupture in 21st-century nuclear deterrence doctrine. As we come to a conclusion, let's summarize what all of this tells us. The military operations that began in June 2025 and carried into 2026 prove three things. First, Operation Midnight Hammer, conducted with 125 aircraft and specialized B-2 bombers, demonstrated concretely that the United States has the capacity to target any underground facility anywhere in the world. This fundamentally changes the calculus of strategic deterrence. Second, bombs do not eliminate uncertainty. Hundreds of kilograms of enriched uranium sit inside tunnels that inspectors cannot enter. From a nuclear security standpoint, this remains the most critical post-war problem. Third, this war has redrawn the geopolitical map of the Middle East. Iran's regional influence has been systematically weakened. But will this weakening be permanent? This process opens a window of opportunity for a potential diplomatic solution. The United States and the international community need to convince Iran to walk through that window. A window of opportunity. But windows close. And before that window closes, finding where the world's most dangerous 400 kilograms are located may be, at this moment in human history, the most critical mission of all. One final note. In the background of this war, other major power conflicts are simultaneously unfolding around the world. Russia holds Ukrainian territory under occupation. Iran supplied Russia with thousands of drones. These drones systematically targeted Ukraine's infrastructure. And now Iran's capacity for this is largely in collapse. I leave this equation with you. In this era where global conflicts are interconnected, every stone that falls in the Middle East sends ripples somewhere else. Strategic calculations must be addressed not purely in military terms, but together with their geopolitical, economic, and humanitarian dimensions. And remember this picture is not over yet. Strikes continue. Negotiations are contested. The uranium is missing. Pickaxe Mountain is under construction. History continues to be written.